blogs that will display more statistics and give us more stories from live, large corporate environments regarding passwords. Anything from, how help desk will do password resets. That's something that I would like to hear more about. I do know a lot of help desks. As an example, let's say if you call them and say, oh, you have lost your password, they will actually send your new password to your manager, and you have to go to your manager to get your new password, as an example. I've seen that many, many times in different countries. Do you trust your manager? So, for Cambridge in the UK in December, and for Las Vegas next year, please submit papers, articles, presentations on that as an example. Now, one of the submissions that we got for our current CFP was from Christian, and it's basically, well, spend 10 seconds telling you what Montego is. But this one, I mean, I read it, it was like, yes, I want this, period. So, Christian?
Actually, do you want to do the backstory with Troy?
What? You have 25 minutes.
Okay.
So,
yeah. The original talk that I was going to deliver today was Troy Hunt and I were going to present on Have I Been Pwned, with Troy presenting Have I Been Pwned itself and myself presenting the Montego integration. Too low still.
oh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're cooking. Essentially, my day job for the moment is I work as a pen tester, but due to obviously eroding sort of commercials of that industry, I've started developing more and more into Montego itself, which is essentially integrating disparate data sources into Montego, and then working out how to best position it in the product itself. So I've done this for a lot of companies. I've developed transforms for Facebook, for Instagram, for Avatar, which takes a person's email address, converts it to an MD5, and then essentially associates a profile picture with that email address. Recorded future, and the most recent one I'm doing is the Redact web application, which basically takes Chinese and European, any sort of competitors on piece, and runs them over your web logs, and it's essentially used for data leakage and all that kind of thing. I've developed transforms in both Canary, which is a third-party sort of rapid application development framework, as well as the transform sets that are available for the server themselves. Pretty much everything that I develop is available for free, and you can go to GitHub, look at my repository, and just search on Montego and find a whole ton of free sort of configuration files and any other documentation that you can go to the transform there. So the agenda for today is largely to just discuss the integration of the APIs themselves from three vendors. Have I Been Pwned, Breachego, and BSidesLV. Have I Been Pwned, as I mentioned before, is Troy Hunt's, I guess you could say, pet project. He doesn't really commercialise it and sort of put it together to learn about Azure itself, but he's recently started doing APIs and that kind of thing. So if you run a identity theft service, you can search people's email addresses and it can tell you now when they're actually compromised. But he also offers a lot of alternatives that cost next to nothing. So if you type in your own email address, it will send you back a breach email from there. Breach alarm, so they've offered an API key to me that allows me to support their free API endpoint, which is to the breached emails endpoint, and BSidesLV, whose API in the leaked database is currently don't worry about the message. Is currently free. I'll also cover the configuration itself for Maltego, and I'll present a couple of case studies. The case study that I'll present today is on Atlassian. We do make a lot of developer tools. It originally started as a joke, but if someone else wants to put forward another example, I'm quite happy to look at doing that. I guess I should cover what Maltego is first. So up on the screen here, I have Maltego, and essentially the power of it is this view here, which is a bubble view. So if we look at a main view here, what we basically have is, I'll just zoom in a bit, email addresses on the top, which then feed into a post pasting. So if we're interested to visualize as to which one of those two pastes is the most popular, we switch it over to bubble view, we select one, and then we say, okay, I've selected this paste, which one are the email addresses that are applicable into that paste. And what we find here is that it selected all the email addresses that have come through. If we select the lower one and select the parents from there, you can see that we've actually identified, because the bubble itself is slightly smaller, that it has less email addresses incoming to it. So what it's essentially used for is link analysis, but it also provides an XML document format which you can use to basically use a web service, so you don't need to continually push out new code changes to the end user. The end user can just pick those up automatically. So the first one I'll cover is have I been pwned? So what I have done with this one is I've integrated all the latest release API version 2 endpoints into it. So this is getting all the breaches for an account. Now an account under have I been pwned is defined as either an alias or an email address. We can also get all relevant pastes to Ghostbin, Pasty, Slexy, etc., where an email address does appear. And we can also get a single breach site itself too. So if you were to run it against Adobe or Hacking Team or any of those, you would be able to find out where the email address was breached, under what domain, and then the history of that breach itself. And as part of this development, we support all the HTTP status codes of the API itself. So we essentially take in two types of inputs in Maltego. The first one being the email address, which is the one down the bottom here, which I'll just zoom in onto. The examples that I'm using are taken from the API documentation itself, so they're already publicised and well known. In addition to that, we have a number of aliases too that are related to the Snapchat database compromise. So within Maltego itself, it enables you to, in the latest release being Chlorine, enables you to position the transforms based on author, then the transform set. So transform set is essentially a series of related transforms to find the individual transforms themselves. So in this case, for aliases, we can run the breached accounts endpoint against it. So which I will do now. Okay. So we get two entities returned from there. One is just a generic entity, which is which essentially allows you to select entities based on if you're using all three providers of information in terms of their API. Have I been paying Breachego and AbuseX? You can select these individual boxes, and then if you're an API provider, essentially do a quality assurance on your own API itself and what your data set is. Now, as you've probably guessed by what was up the top here, so we're related to the Snapchat database one. These aliases have all appeared within Snapchat itself. Okay, and so as an investigator, what I would like to investigate is what are the relevant documentation that's against Snapchat. So we get essentially the note view here. If we click on the entity, we see that same note is repeated here. Now that is text that is returned by the Have I Been Pwned API itself. And it's obviously come back and now said that not only have these aliases been compromised, but also the domain itself. As you can see by all those entities that have been selected. Now this is the paste example. So what we originally started with is Troy gave me pasty, which was identified as 730804888, which is the top one. So what I had essentially done is run all those email addresses that were in one paste against another one, and it's returned pasty ID 730804098. Now, as you can see, in terms of the view itself, the ones that are pointing into this 7308049 pasty are not the same post to pasty that was the one above. So if you were investigating an incident or performing incident response and you wanted to essentially contain a disclosure, judging by the fact that a lot of breaches are reposted to pasty, pastebin, ghostbin quickly, so that continuously, you could pretty much work out that you might want to get a copy of both of these pastes because they might indicate that you've been breached at different times and the data's been coming through. Now, as one final thing, what Breachego can do is it will actually automate all of this for you. So I've created two Breachego machines. Now, essentially what these are is that they take an input entity and they will do the breached transforms for you. And then if it returns a domain name, it will also check the Have I Been Pwned records for the domain name itself. So if you were to run it, it simply takes an alias, somewhat struggles, and I'm not sure why it actually does this.
The live demo troll.
No, well, this goes back to Daniel Cuthbert. For those of you who are wondering, these demos are actually running from a HP Stream 11, which is like the $200 laptop that you can buy. But anyway, moving on, that essentially runs the transforms that are applicable to the email entity first, and then to the domain entity that's returned from there. So I'll come back to that one to actually show you that it's executed and all that. But just to move along, there is one other final thing. So what it essentially does is, as you can see, this is against foo.bar. So foo.bar has appeared in these pastebin posts, and in addition to that, it's been used in these various breaches. Now, so that's the first run of what the machine does. Then the machine picks up all the domain types. And just by selecting the group of transforms, it then goes through and populates what the actual compromises are and gives you individual annotations as to what they are, which you can look into the notes itself. So that's what the machine does and produces, sort of automates for you. Now, in previous versions of Maltego, you used to be able to run machines against the import entities themselves. Under Chlorine, that is not possible using the context menu anymore. But I'll get onto that later on. The other thing is too, with Have I Been Pwned, there is a account deep link. So when Maltego produces those results, if you go to the detailed view, it will produce a deep link back to Have I Been Pwned. So you can send that link to an end user, and Have I Been Pwned will actually render on their web application itself where the account has been compromised and where it's been found. So just to reuse the former Have I Been Pwned example, so we just run it again. I'll just move on quickly because I'm starting to run out of time. But the detailed view here is if you click this link down here, it will actually redirect you back to the account from there. The next one being Breach Alarm. Breach Alarm is fairly simple in what they do. So the endpoint that they provided us largely only adds the number of breaches that the email address has been involved in and when it was last breached. So what I had decided to do from there was essentially insert it in as a note. So you can run this against like have I been paying all the email addresses, and then run the breach alarm transform on those email addresses itself and get some more additional information from there. The final one being Abusics. Abusics are an interesting mob. If you look at the left side of this diagram, you'll see a number of phrases here. These are actual passwords that people have encoded. For examples I've taken from Abusics themselves. And we run the transforms against them, and what it gives us back is the clear text password, but also the encoding that was used on the password itself. So if you're able to split the password fields, you get what the clear text password is that this text uses. If you click on the entity itself, you find that SHA-512 that was used to encrypt the password, which is this one above it here. So that's quite good if you want to just send a whole ton of passwords off and see if they've been broken in the past, and then sort of work it from there. Do I have time for one more?
Well, I mean, we're going off for 1 hour break afterwards, yeah.
Okay. So, the other service that Abusics provide is obviously just to check an email address. So this is again one that we can combine against all of them. Now, I quite like Abusics because they say my email address has never been compromised. I can tell you that's false. This is the one I use on CPAN, so I know for a fact that it has been compromised. But again, this goes back to the various vendors that produce these breach databases could actually do it. But just to present a case study, Craig Davids, who's the CSO for Alicia, stated that he was going to come to Black Hat. So just as a bit of fun, I said to him, well, we would look at what Alicia had done in terms of if they had been broken into, and these are generally the cases as to what you would actually use them for. So you can see we start running the transforms there. So we start kicking them all off in one go, and this is what it looks like if you're actually running all three use cases or all three APIs against the email address itself. Now, as you can see, Craig himself here is not compromised, so that's obviously a good sign. But as we get down to here, we find that Breach Alarm has listed some of these email addresses as breached. So obviously to find out which ones those are, we click on the child entity and then select parents. But we find that they are both listed as part of the Adobe breach and the Hacking Tech breach. So that's essentially what you could use to run it against your entire Active Directory list, that kind of thing, to work out quite quickly where your breaches are, or if you've got any breaches that are coming on board. Tomorrow at Black Hat, I'll actually be demonstrating how you can use it as a timed machine. So essentially, it runs every hour, so you just don't end up hammering the Montego transport server. Does anyone have any questions? Or yes?
I'm just wondering, for any of these sorts of queries into the system, are there any ways of doing so in a privacy-protecting manner? That is, could I ask about my email address without letting you know my email address?
Yeah, sure.
Could you find out who are actually on Ashley Madison? That's your real question.
No. So I think and Music's implement SHA-5 for. Have I Been Pwned doesn't implement anything, and the reason that Troy doesn't state that is because it's very easy to reverse the hashing rainbow tables and all
Yeah,
that.
if those are unsolved, okay, so there's no sort of homomorphic kind of, thank you.
It's to give people peace of mind, but it doesn't really change that. A lot of them go into explanations as to why they do it, but no one has a solution for that at the moment.
Yeah. Give it up for Christian. I see this as really, really interesting, both from the attacking and defending side, because basically, one of the things that we really, really know about users is that their next password is going to be their current password plus one. So if, as an attacker, if you can figure out like the naming scheme being used, you can use transforms like this to look up employees of a certain company or organization online to see if they have been breached already in a very easy way. Then you can find out what kind of passwords were they using. And chances are that the passwords they use at some site they're going to compromise are pretty revealing about what kind of passwords or password structures they're using at the time being. So using this, it becomes easier to break in. And as a defender, you can also use this to defend, to have a look at how any of your users been breached in external breaches and eventually do something about that. There's going to be a 1 hour breakout. There's chill out in the chill out room, happy hour pretty much. And at 5 o'clock, we will have a young female master student from Norway. I've been co-supervising her for the past year for a master's thesis. And it's basically, tell me who you are, and I will tell you your Android lock pattern. It's a cool talk. So be back at 5. See you then.